So I think we'll go ahead and get started. And those that are late can join us as their technology allows. Good evening and welcome to tonight's program entitled How to Back Up Your Digital Life. My name is Mike Edding and I'm joined by Susan McBride. We both work in the Adult Services Department here at Hinsdale Public Library. Over the next hour or so, we will do our best to give you some practical advice on how to best back up your documents and photos. So first, why is it so important to back files up? Aren't modern computers more reliable than ever? And that's true. Computers now are more reliable, but regardless of how advanced and reliable they may be, there's always a need to keep extra copies of your important information safe. After all, we're all vulnerable to things like theft, natural disasters, accidental deletion, and more. Another question you might want to ask yourself is, what files should you back up? I think you should primarily concern yourself with things that would be impossible or really difficult to recreate. Things like digital photos, tax documents, your music collection, etc. So you should really focus on those essential files, looking to possibly expand what is covered in your backups down the road. If you do find that you have more space, maybe you get an upgraded tier of some cloud service, you can include more and more documents in your backup. That way you have more protection, but it's really important to get the most critical files first. In some cases, you can actually back up your entire computer. This can save a ton of time if something truly goes wrong with your system, like a crash of some sort. But I'd say it really is optional to do that sort of thing. A final question you should ask yourself is, how much risk can I tolerate? Some of the approaches to backing up your data we'll talk about are easier to implement than others, but they do leave you a little more exposed to the risk of losing your files. So you have to kind of decide yourself where you want to fall. Do you want an absolutely foolproof, 100% covered sort of approach, or do you want something that's easier that you know you're actually going to follow through with? Speaking of ease of use, on our next slide, we have I guess it's sort of a couple of continua. You can see here that your level of data protection increases as the ease of use drops. And conversely, as the ease of use is increased, the amount of protection that you're afforded drops. I've thrown some common examples on the graph to help give you some real world anchor points. On the left, you have iCloud backups. In the center, you have local backup to a USB drive. And on the right is something called the 3-2-1 approach. Susan and I are going to talk about each of these options as well as a few others over the next several minutes. At the end of the program, I think you should be able to find a spot on this chart which feels right for your use case. Susan's going to share a few of her choices for backup options at the easier end of the scale next.
Thank you, Mike. So there are a lot of different strategies that we're going to be talking about. We're going to start with the easiest, the most hands-off approach to your backup strategy, and that is using cloud-based services as your backup. And I'm going to ask if everybody could mute their microphones. We're getting some background noise, and that way it won't show up in the recording. So let's get started with our cloud backup as the easiest approach to backing up your digital life. So a lot of time we think we are backing up to the cloud, but what we're actually doing is synchronizing with the cloud. So cloud-based storage such as iCloud, OneDrive, or Dropbox, they do back up your files to the cloud. But if you delete the file from your hard drive, you will also be deleting it from the cloud. It's not creating a separate copy up in the cloud. It's just duplicating, synchronizing what you're doing. So true backups, such as Backblaze, CrashPlan, and Carbonite are a couple of ways, cloud-based services that you can employ to do a true backup. And they make an exact copy of your file and store it on the cloud. And if you delete something from your hard drive, it's still up there in the cloud. And with the true backup, if you do inadvertently delete a file, they're usually retrievable. So an example of what we would call synchronization are Dropbox, iCloud, OneDrive, even Google Drive. That's not to say that synchronization is bad. I just thought it would be important for you to understand the difference between synchronizing to the cloud and truly backing up to the cloud. We're going to focus though on synchronizing because it's really the easiest method to store and back up your things to a separate spot than your hard drive. So with that said, using cloud services as a backup, it's a very reasonable first step to keeping your digital life backed up. Using iCloud or OneDrive, for example, can be set up to back up automatically. So it's effortless, it's mindless, it just happens. In addition, with these cloud-based services, you can access your files from anywhere using your login to that particular account. And it makes it very versatile, and you can work on things wherever you are on whatever device you're on, and you're able to access them from the cloud. You can also share your files. So if you want to share photos from a trip, or if you want to collaborate with somebody on a document, you can use these cloud-based services to do that, and it makes it very easy. In terms of using them as a backup and storing your materials on them, the nice thing about using cloud services is that they are relatively safe. They use the AES 256-bit encryption, and many require two-factor authentication, which, even though that's a pain and we all hate to have to enter in a separate piece of information or get that text message to allow access to it, it does keep your digital world a lot safer. And so it's, that's an important thing to do. Finally, the nice thing about these cloud-based services is that they store your digital materials, whether it be documents or photos, off-site, not on your computer. So if your computer is damaged, if it's stolen, you can still access these files from another device. And so that's what makes this really a great option and the easiest option for backing up. There is a bit of risk when you're taking something from your complete control and giving it to somebody else, but you have to kind of weigh out those risks as to whether or not they're worth it. And they're probably lower than you would think, despite what people might be saying on the internet. Information stored on the cloud is actually likely to be in many ways more secure than what you have stored on your own devices. And that's because cloud companies rely on a far more robust cybersecurity measure to protect your sensitive data. The files are encrypted. The servers are constantly being updated in terms of their security. The cloud providers use AI to look for vulnerabilities in their securities. They rely on firewalls. They have redundancy, so your data is backed up just in case there's some kind of large-scale outage. And they hire outside security companies to test their servers and software regularly to make sure they're secure. So I'm going to guess that you don't do all that with your home PC or laptop. And so, you can rest pretty easy knowing that your data is safe when it's being stored in the cloud. There are things you can do to maximize cloud security. when you send things to your cloud services, you want to make sure that your provider is encrypting your data, and you want to make sure that you enable that two-factor authentication that I mentioned earlier, if that is an option with your cloud provider, because that will definitely add another layer of support. And you want to be careful because, as I mentioned earlier, if you're using iCloud, Dropbox, OneDrive, some of these other cloud-based services, it is a synchronization. So if you end up deleting it from your hard drive, it is going to delete the cloud document as well. So you want to be careful with how what you're deleting from your computer, and don't just assume that if you've stored it in iCloud, it's safe. It's going to be deleted if you do end up deleting it from your computer. So here are a few examples of the cloud services that are most commonly people are using. As I mentioned, iCloud, that's an iOS-based service. So if you have a Mac, iPhone, iPad, then you're going to be familiar with iCloud storage. It's very easy to use. It syncs really nicely with all of your Apple devices. So your phone, your computer, your iPad, they're all syncing up to the same account in the cloud. You're able to access your data through the iCloud app or from the website. You can even access it on a PC if you go to the iCloud website. You can also tell it what you want to store. You don't have to send everything up to the cloud. You can specify the files or the apps or the specific pieces of information that you want to save in iCloud. The first 5 gigabytes are free, and then you're going to begin paying for it, paying more as you increase the amount of storage that you're going to be using. And that's going to be true with all of these services. So Google Drive is the next one that you've probably heard about. And Google Drive is it's really 100% cloud-based. You're not going to have anything stored on your hard drive when you're using Google Drive. All of your G Suite materials are going to be stored up in the cloud. It provides 15 gigabytes of free storage, and then you're going to pay more as you increase your storage. It has a dedicated website and app, and it's compatible with every platform of computer. So you can use Google Drive on the Mac, on a PC, on really any platform. It's very easy to collaborate across documents with Google Drive. You just share your photos or you share your documents, and other people are able to, add to them or see them, add comments to them. And it's a pretty nice cloud-based system. And it does perform automatic backups of all of your Google documents and photos and everything else. So it's automatic. You don't even have to think about it. OneDrive is Microsoft's cloud-based storage, and it's like iCloud. It offers 5 gigabytes of free data storage with subscriptions then moving up from there. If you use Office 365, then using OneDrive is really pretty seamless, and it allows you to manage everything in one place using your Microsoft account. And just like with the other cloud-based storage services, you can access your contents on pretty much any operating system using the web. So it's pretty versatile. And then you've got also Dropbox. Dropbox is not tied to any one operating system, so it might be a nice option if you're trying to not get tied into Microsoft or Apple products. It has a lot of compatibility with all of your devices. And the nice thing about Dropbox is that it creates a dedicated directory on your computer system, which makes it pretty easy to upload files. And you can decide what you want to upload to Dropbox and what you don't want to upload to Dropbox. It backs up automatically to the cloud. And if something goes wrong, you can pretty quickly recover your contents. Finally, pCloud is one other cloud service. It's not as well known as the others. It's a Swiss company that's been around since 2013, so for about 10 years. And it gives you a virtual drive that doesn't take up any space on your system, but it allows you to then send things up to the cloud automatically. You can tell it what folders that you want to be saved, or which part of your hard drive you want to save up to the pCloud. So those are just a few of the options. There are a lot of different cloud-based services out there. These are the most popular, obviously, and you've probably heard about almost all of them. So saving things to the cloud is pretty easy to do. If you want to take the next step up, then you're going to want to back up your files locally. What does it mean to back things up locally? Well, it just means that you're going to be backing up the physical contents of some or all of your hard drive to another physical device. And you're going to be the one in charge of this. You're in control of it. You're choosing the device and you're setting up the backup parameters. When you back up your data locally, if you make changes to it on your hard drive, or if you delete it from your hard drive altogether, you're still going to have a version of it in your backup device. And so unlike saving to the cloud in these more synchronized cloud-based systems, you're going to have a copy of it on your locally stored device. So the first level of local backup is the flash drive. And we've all used these. I think I'm sure you know what this is. And with a flash drive, you can choose to back up certain files, or you can back up your whole hard drive, depending on how large it is, onto one of these flash drives. They range in size from 16 gigabytes to 1 terabyte. And obviously with the more memory that they contain, the higher their cost is going to be. I would say these are the least expensive method of backing up, and they're really easy to use. You just plug them into your USB or USB-C port of your computer and drag over to it what you want to store on it. They are easy to physically share with somebody. You just can hand them the flash drive and then they have the contents of, whatever you backed up onto it. But they're easy to share with someone if they're not far away. And so the cloud-based storage is better if you're sharing with people from a distance, because obviously they can access it and not have to be in the same room with you. It's difficult to collaborate on a flash drive, so that's one of the drawbacks. But probably in terms of backing up your digital life, one of the biggest drawbacks of a flash drive is that they are easy to lose, easy to damage. They're susceptible to viruses and malware. They're not password protected. And, somebody could take your flash drive and then they have access to everything that you've put on it, whatever it is. So any data that is, you don't want other people to see, you really don't want to probably back it up onto a flash drive. The next level of local storage backup would be using an external hard drive and connecting that to your system and then backing up your documents and your photos to one of these external hard drives. If you choose to back up your important files locally on an external hard drive, you do have two options. There's a solid state drive, also known as an SSD, or an external hard drive disk, or HDD. And both are good options. Each has its own pros and cons, but either way, you would be very well served backing up your important documents to one of these external hard drives. regularly to protect your digital life. So the regularly is, you can't just do it once and think that you're protected. You do have to regularly back up your documents and hard drive. So let's start with the difference between them. The solid state drive is a newer technology. Your data is stored on a microchip in a solid state drive. There are no moving parts, making it faster, it's quieter, it's perhaps less susceptible to damage because there's less moving parts. Solid state drives are more expensive than hard disk drives, and they typically have a little less storage capacity than an external hard disk drive. Hard disk drives are spinning platters. They are spinning platters inside the casement, and they read and they write data on these spinning platters. They tend to be less expensive and have larger memory capacity. So in comparison, the two drives that I've shown here, the ScanDisk is on the left, and it's a 1 terabyte solid state drive, and it costs about $100 on Amazon. The same size on the right, the Seagate, the hard disk drive, holds a terabyte of data as well, but it costs half the price at $50. In general, solid state drives are more susceptible to data loss than hard disk drives. Hard disk drives can experience trouble with physical malfunctions because you've got those two spinning plates, but the data from a hard disk drive can usually still be recovered if something happens. Data loss is seen less often with solid state drives, but it's a little trickier and requires an extensive amount of work to recover anything that has been lost. So many external drives, both the solid state drive and the hard disk drive, come with rugged protective casings, and so that will help prevent damage or physical or otherwise. So if you purchase an external hard drive, you plug it into your computer and you tell your computer to back up your files on the new external drive. Good for you. You're all set, right? Wrong. Unless you have software on your computer to automatically back up your data to that attached hard drive or even to the cloud, you're only backing up what you currently have on your device and not what your future going to have in the future. So depending on whether you're using a Mac or a PC, you will use your computer's software to set up automatic backups, and that's really the best practice. So if you're using a Mac, the software that you're going to use is called Time Machine, and you may be familiar with it, you might not. But when you connect the storage device, the hard drive, to your Mac will likely ask you if you want to use it for Time Machine backups. And if it doesn't, then you want to open up Time Machine settings from the Apple menu. And you want to select that you're going to back it up automatically. After you select the storage device in your Time Machine settings, then Time Machine will automatically begin to make those backups periodically. And you're able to also go into Time Machine to identify exactly what files and folders you want to back up. So you can customize that as well. With Windows, you're going to use file history to start your backup. So you're going to connect your external drive to your computer, and then in the start menu, you're going to go to file history, and then you're going to select add a drive to choose the external hard drive to use for your file history backups. And now you want to set that you want it automatically to back up your files. And again, in file history, you are able to review the different folders and choose which folders and files you want to include in your backup. By setting up automatic backups to your external hard drive using either Time Machine or a file history, you're ensuring that if something does happen to your computer's hard drive, you're able to recover everything that was most recently stored on your external hard drive. And now Mike is going to talk a little bit more about how you can go even a step further.
Thanks, Susan. So yeah, there are some even more involved ways of protecting your data that give you a little bit more security at the expense of ease of use, as we talked about earlier. I'm going to talk about two things in this section. One is a hardware device called a NAS, or network attached storage, and the other is the 3-2-1 strategy, which kind of ties together a lot of the things that we've been talking about. So in terms of the NAS itself, as I mentioned, it stands for network attached storage. In the most basic sense, a NAS can be thought of as a little computer that has one or more hard drives inside of it. So if you see one in person, it's going to look like a pretty small little device, but the strength is that it has multiple hard drives inside typically. And we'll talk about how that can benefit you in your backup strategy in just a moment. The NAS doesn't plug in with USB to your computer. Instead, it has a network cable, and that network cable connects to your router. So if you have your router in the dining room, then you would have another device sitting next to your router probably, or if it's in an office somewhere, it would be living there. And the great thing about NAS is that once you've installed it onto your network, it will allow all the computers that are on your network to see the NAS and vice versa. So this, you can see in the diagram there that we have computers on the left-hand side, the router in the middle, and the NAS is to the right. So you could theoretically set up little directories on this NAS, one for each person in your family, and then you could save files there. This is sort of not exactly a backup feature, but it's more of like a file server feature. If you have ever worked with file servers at work where you have shared documents somewhere, this is the same concept, but for the home and small business. On the next slide, we'll be talking about, excuse me, some particular models that have come highly regarded from the Wirecutter. The New York Times has this tech group that tests products, and they're called Wirecutter, and they recommend a couple of different NASs. One is from a company called Synology, and one is from a company called QNAP. And they're both about the same price. We're talking $300-ish for the device. That doesn't include the hard drives that go inside it, though. Both of these are relatively comparable, but I would argue that Synology has better software, while the QNAP systems tend to have better hardware. So the little microprocessor that's like the computer brain can do things a little bit faster. Whereas with the Synology, it's more about ease of use and refining that software package. I would mention, though, that QNAP has had some issues over the last couple of years related to ransomware. So somehow these people, these criminals, are accessing computers, your computer, via the internet. And they're basically installing software that takes over the operating system and won't let you have access to your files again until you pay them some crazy amount of money, $10,000 or something. So you want to avoid that, obviously. Synology hasn't had those kind of problems recently, so that's another reason you might consider Synology. But from what I understand, the QNAP issues have mainly happened to devices that have not been updated to the latest software. So if you were to keep your QNAP NAS up to date, I doubt you would have any issues at all. But I thought it would be worth mentioning. One downside to Synology NAS or a QNAP NAS is that they cost some money. So we already talked about the base price of about $300 for each of these without hard drives. Once you throw in a couple of good size hard drives, you're looking at about $600 or $700. So, you know, this starts to be a real commitment of cost of your money, your hard-earned money, to have better data security. And it could get even more expensive if you were to get a 4 hard drive model instead of the 2 hard drive models that I've mentioned here. Then you're looking at about $1,000 once you factor in the cost of the drives. So for a lot of people, this is going to be seen as overkill. But I will say that once you have these configured, a lot of the things that you would want to do in terms of backup will become automated. So that's the benefit of something like this, or one of the benefits. Taking a closer look at Synology on the next slide, there's an application that they include with their products in the Plus series. So the Plus series is a little more expensive than the run-of-the-mill cheapest Synologies you can get, but you do get some added features such as this special software, which is Active Backup for Business. And despite the name, you would find that this would be perfectly usable in a home setting. But small businesses might use something like this as well. So what does Active Backup for Business do? It allows you to schedule automated backups for each computer that's on your network, letting you determine the frequency of backups, whether you want them hourly, daily, weekly, or some custom schedule that you have in mind. You can treat weekends differently. You can treat weekday, you know, it's very sophisticated. And after your schedule is set, you just tell it to run, and it will continually run in the background and look at any changes that have been made to your files and uploading those changes to the NAS so that you're protected with the latest version. I should mention also that Active Backup for Business allows you to do something called an incremental backup automatically. So the first backup where you have gigabytes of data that are being transferred to the NAS, that'll take a while. I mean, it could take hours if you have an awful lot of data, but for most people, it shouldn't take very long. But each subsequent backup only uploads the files that have been changed, kind of like Dropbox does and iCloud. It doesn't upload everything all the time. It's just uploading the things that are different. So this incremental backup allows those subsequent backups to go really quickly, just in a matter of seconds or minutes, oftentimes. So it's a very powerful tool. I don't think QNAP has software that's quite as refined as the Synology Active Backup for Business, but I may be biased because I have a Synology unit. I will say also, I talked about backing up your entire computer, and that is an option with this Active Backup for Business. If you have a Windows machine, for example, it will allow you to take a backup of the entire system, and it does those incremental backups over time. So you might have, if you find that you have a computer crash and you need to recover data, you can go back to any of the backups that have been saved. So you might go back to just a day ago, just an hour ago, depends on how often you have it set up, and it'll just completely rebuild your computer to the way it was. I have had to use this on at least, I think, 1 or 2 occasions on my Windows machine. So it was a nice comfort to know that I could do that. But for essential files only, you wouldn't have to worry about doing an entire computer backup. It's kind of like a luxury. So I want to talk about one of the other data forms of data protection on the next slide. It's called drive failure protection. It's a compelling one, this feature. It isn't included in your external drives that you're plugging directly into your computer. It doesn't have any sort of drive failure protection, but a NAS often does. Basically, if you have a NAS that has more than one drive, you'll probably be setting up some sort of drive failure protection. And all this means is basically you're kind of like having a spare drive in your NAS. And this would, in the unlikely event that one of the hard drives in your NAS crashes, it's able to recreate your files based on data in the remaining drives that you have installed. So even if you have a crash, which doesn't happen very often, but it could, you're covered to some extent. The downside of this is that you have to set aside one or more drives to be this sort of shadow backup copy that's running in the background. So if you buy two big drives, two 8-terabyte drives, for example, one of those drives is going to entirely be used for protection for the other one. So you would only get 8 terabytes of usable space. I mean, 8 terabytes is a lot, but still, it's half of what you might expect. It's sort of the cost of having this kind of redundancy. So that's NAS devices. And the next topic I'd like to talk about is something entirely different. It's sort of a way of thinking of backups called the 3-2-1 approach. And this particular approach is widely recognized by experts as providing a great strategy for making sure you don't lose any of your valuable files. And we're going to get in the weeds a little bit here, but not too bad. This simply means that you have 3 copies of your data. 2 of them should be in different formats, and 1 of them should be stored offsite. So 3, 2, 1, 3 copies, 2 of them on different formats, and 1 of them offsite. So on the next slide, what do we mean by 3 copies? We typically mean one of the copies is your original file, and then you have 2 additional copies. And ideally, those 2 copies would be identical to the first one. But maybe it could be like an older version of the file that that is okay for you to recreate. So it takes a little more effort to get exact copies of your files all the time. So you might be willing to live with a little bit of risk of reverting to a previous edition or version of the file. So that's simply what we mean by 3 copies. Well, what do we mean by 2 different formats? Susan already discussed a number of the different formats that you might use in backing up files, from hard drives to cloud storage to solid state drives to flash drives. As long as you're using 2 different formats in your plan, you should be safe. And then what do we mean by 1 copy offsite? So this could be as simple as a cloud backup that you're using, like OneDrive or Dropbox, something like that. Or it could refer to a physical copy that you keep in a different location, often maybe at a friend's house or possibly at work. Like for your most important files, you put them on a flash drive, you put them in your desk at work, and that way, if something, God forbid, happens to your home, you're covered by having those files at your work location or your friend's house or that sort of thing. So that's all we're really talking about when it comes to offsite 1 copy. I thought we could go over a real world example of this 3-2-1 approach. And you can see I've got the little diagrams in the various stages. So the first column refers to the original file, and that's a family recipe or a set of family recipes that you have on your hard drive. You keep them on your laptop. That's where they live. So this would check one of the copies of the data in the first column. So we have a yellow check mark there. And it also checks a box in the second column because that one copy is on a specific kind of media, the internal hard drive of your computer. So we get a check mark there. We just have to fill in all the check marks in our strategy and we're all set. So for the second copy of the data, we use Dropbox, the cloud synchronization solution that Susan was talking about a little bit earlier, and any of the other ones would work as well. So this cloud copy would automatically be updated as you make changes to your recipes. So you should always be protected. And that adds 3 more checkboxes. So we're almost done after this second backup. So the Dropbox is a second copy of the data, so 2 in the first column. The format is different. It's in the cloud. So we have our second column completely full now. And it just leaves 1 more copy of your data that we have to account for in the final stage. So in the final copy of the data would be on your NAS. Automatically, every night you have set your NAS to back up your files, and your recipes are included in that. So you're always covered on your NAS. So that would be yet another copy of the data. So you have 3 copies, 2 different formats at least, and 1 version is offsite in the cloud. So as you can see, it sounds a little daunting when we're explaining it, but in this example, it wasn't that hard to implement a 3-2-1 plan. And doing this will really give you good protection. It's not essential. You might be perfectly fine for the rest of your life using one of the like the middle tier of protection or the easy tier of protection, but it's nice to know that there's an option available if you want to get really serious about it and are willing to spend the money. So Susan's going to talk about special cases regarding photos.
Let me unmute myself. So one question that is out there a lot is how do you get the photos that you have stored on your phone? How do you back those up? How do you get them onto your computer? Photos are living now digitally rather than having those shoeboxes full of printed out photographs. And so how do we store those to make sure that they are safe and that they can be passed on to generations or to people the same way that the physical copies of photos used to be passed along? And so I want to talk just a little bit about how you can think about photo storage. It's very similar to what we've been talking about. There's not a lot of new information out there. But I just want to offer some suggestions on ways that you may want to think about storing your photos and backing them up and pulling them from your phone, where you're probably taking a lot of your photos, and putting them in your storage plan, your backup plan. So one place to start is to have a hard drive, an external hard drive, your computer hard drive, I'm sorry, that has all of the originals of your photos. And then to have a second drive, like an external dedicated hard drive. So just like the scan disk that I had in the photo earlier of the solid state drive, have one that you keep specifically for your photo backups. And then to have a third copy offsite, and that would be storing it in the cloud on Google Photos or in iCloud or one of the other cloud-based storage, Dropbox. And that way you've got your originals on your computer, you've got all of them on a secondary hard drive, and you've also got them all up in the cloud. So one question is how to retrieve them from your phone. And usually you can plug your phone directly into your computer and import the photos that way. So if you're importing your photos into an Apple computer, your photos will likely want to go directly into the Photos app, but you can also use the image capture app if you want to put your photos someplace else. If you would like to store them in a folder on your desktop, for example, so that they're easier to transfer to your external storage. You're able to do that by using the image capture app on your iOS device. And you just simply identify where you want the photos to go, and they will go there. If you're importing your photos into a PC from your phone, your photos will likely want to go into the pictures folder unless you direct it to download someplace else. The other thing you can do is to use a device like this QB Pro cube that I have in the upper right hand corner of the slide. And what this is, it plugs directly into the charging box for your iPhone, and this is only compatible with iPhones. But it plugs onto your charging box, and then you plug your phone directly into that to charge it. And while it is charging, it literally is pulling the photos off your phone and putting it onto a micro SD card that is inside the QB Pro. And that's the nice thing about this is you have to charge your phone every day. And so it's a great way to just regularly back up your photos on this QB Pro. And then you can take the micro SD card and put it into your computer or another storage device to pull the photos off to back it up. There are also the same types of devices for Android phones as well, where it looks like a flash drive almost, and you plug it into the phone and it will automatically extract the photos, and then you can take it and plug it into your computer and it will export the photos to your computer. So these are all good options to back up your photos and to organize them. But whatever you do, I do recommend having, a hard drive, an external hard drive that you really just dedicate to your photo storage. And then you can just collect all of your photos there and keep them organized. And it's a nice system in order to make sure that they're intact for future generations. So there are lots of ways to back up your digital life. Choosing a strategy is going to involve first identifying what it is that you want to back up specifically. Is it documents? Is it photos? What do you want to do with it when it's backed up? And then deciding where you want to back it up to, whether it's the cloud, locally, off-site, all three. But most importantly, having a strategy is the first step. And then sticking to that strategy is the second step. And that's sometimes the trickier step. But I think that Mike and I have given you the tools where you can begin to think about it and lay out what you want to do. Wherever possible, setting your backup to occur automatically is truly the best strategy, because then you don't even have to think about it. And that's all that we have prepared for tonight. We are happy to take any questions that you might have. You can either unmute yourself or use the Q&A feature or the chat, and we'll answer any questions that you might have or comments. Well, if we don't have any questions or if we don't have any comments, thank you for coming tonight. And we were so happy that you were able to join us, and we hope to see you at one of our future presentations as well. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.